For generations, Saints fans have trusted one voice.
Get ready to party with the Lombardi, New Orleans. Bush turns left side, 10-5, dives for the pylon. Here's a throw back in the end zone, leaping reception, and a touchdown, Marcus Colston. Throws into the end zone, catch made by Graham. Jimmy Graham deep over the middle in the Graham Canyon.
From your favorite players.
Move over, Marino. There's a breeze coming through the door. Intercepted. It's Vilma back on his feet to the 31-yard line.
To your favorite plays.
Hakeem drops the ball. Hakeem drops the ball. Brian Mill might have fallen on it at the 10-yard line.
Now's the time to turn down your radio and turn up your television.
Fox 8 Sports presents Jim Henderson, A Legend Signs Off. Sponsored by Acadian Windows, the official window company of the Houdat Nation.
Snap, placement, kicked by Hartley, and it is done! It's good! It's good! Pigs have flown! Hell is frozen over! The Saints are on their way to the Super Bowl!
It's the one call that every Saints fan will remember, and it's the one that Jim Henderson will never ever forget. Hello everyone, I'm Juan Kincaid, and over the next hour, the longtime voice of the Saints and sportscasting legend will be remembered and celebrated by those that know him best.
Well, you always said New Orleans, we were so lucky to have Jim all these years.
Just a wonderful person, a real pro. You know, I admire watching him. I don't know if he ever had a bad broadcast.
I see Jim Henderson's career to be running in perfect symmetry with names like Summerall and Inberg and Gowdy and Whitaker and McKay. He was cut from that cloth, a classical broadcaster who always delivered a gold medal type performance.
And before he decided to exit the booth stage left, Jim got the chance to deliver a Super Bowl winning broadcast.
It's picked off! It's picked off! It's Tracy Porter again! He's running free!
Had I never gotten a chance to announce a Super Bowl, had I never gotten a chance to announce a winning Super Bowl, I think I would be a little bit reluctant to leave, hoping that maybe this would be the year. But having done that, I mean, once you're part of that, they can never take that away. You know, they can never take 2009 away. They can never take some of those moments away, some of those calls. And I'll have that, fortunately, because I was in that chair for the rest of my life.
Jim's time in the broadcast chair and on New Orleans airwaves spanned more than 4 decades. But there comes a time in everyone's life when enough is enough.
When you start thinking about retiring, you've really retired. And I think that's so true because I've been thinking about retirement for the last year or two, and it's made a difference.
But you couldn't hear a difference in his voice the last time you turned down your television and turned up Saints radio.
Here's Breeze, dropping, looking, throwing into the end zone. Alvin Kamara, touchdown Saints!
Had you known the Vikings playoff game was to be Jim Henderson's last as the voice of the Saints, would you have savored his sound even more? His face, which had been a fixture on television sets for years, said so long to another Saints season the very next night.
It truly has been a labor of love. I'm going to miss this, I really am.
We didn't know it at the time, but Jim did. He knew long before the end of the season that this would be his final season covering sports. And he went out the way he'd hoped, on top and satisfied with the job he'd done for generations of sports fans. From the very beginning, Saints fans got attached to Jim's game day voice, and as his popularity in the market grew, so too did the popularity of his Monday commentary.
It broadened the people who would watch me, I think especially from the women's audience. I think it appealed to women to have something that was a bit more literary than maybe they were used to. It wasn't just X's and O's. I tried to bring the human side into it and the emotional side into it, and to speak to them as fans and tell them perhaps something they didn't know, or to look down the road to something they might expect.
What he said on Monday brought clarity to what Saints fans saw or heard him say on the radio on Sunday. Jim's most famous calls never seemed rehearsed, nor did they ever seem rushed, but they always seemed to fit the moment.
Hakeem drops the ball! Hakeem drops the ball! You gotta be kidding me. The New Orleans Saints football! There is a God after all!
Which, a decade later, brought about flying pigs and hell freezing over.
Actually, it was right up here mowing the lawn. I would think about in moments like that, you know, what would I say if the Saints ever won the Super Bowl? And there had been people that you'd see in the stands with pigs fly or hell freezes when the Saints were playing well. And I thought, you know, if the Saints ever won the Super Bowl, I would say pigs have flown, hell has frozen over, the Saints have won the Super Bowl. Well, then when it came down to the Hartley kick, and it was such a climactic moment, it won the game, and there was such a great relief, I thought, in the back of my mind, I said, you know, maybe I better not press my luck. Maybe I better just go ahead and use this call for whatever it's worth now. And it almost became a symbol of the 2009 season.
Which culminated with the Saints getting ready to party with the Lombardi after winning Super Bowl 44. Everyone has their favorite Jim call, and it was never lost in translation. The grammarian, the wordsmith that Jim Henderson has always been, understood that his listeners were seeing the game not only through his eyes, but also through his voice. These Saints, this city, this sports gig, 40 years of all three has a way of both hardening you and humbling you. Jim's seen it all and done it all, but it's how he did it that makes him the legend and Hall of Famer that we see him as today. The English teacher that knew a ton about sports has brought the rest of us along, at his cultured pace of course, helping us to see the game from a different perspective while improving our overall vocabulary along the way.
Thanks for giving me a chance when a lot of people didn't want to back in 1978. Thanks for sticking with me. And I hope that I've justified your time.
And he kind of talked me into doing the announcing. I never missed football doing it. I just enjoyed doing that. We had fun. And of course, we were fortunate that the team got pretty good.
I think it's great. I hope that now that Dad's retired, he'll get some more time to spend with Archie and Olivia. Maybe double dates or something.
Breeze steps up in the pocket, throws, and it's wide open. Henderson, 10, 5, and there it is.
I find it odd that it took him retiring for him to get invited over to your house.
He's been at my house before. He's been here. Matter of fact, I never invited him a lot because he never would leave when he did come. No.
And things would be missing when I did. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that, you know, when you think about how y'all's relationship kind of formed, it was around football. I mean, what brought you together. Here we are 30 plus years later, and it seems like it's as strong as ever, maybe even stronger.
Oh, you know, leaving football is hard. And the longer you play, the harder it is. And one thing in my last years of playing, and I knew I was, you know, in the fourth quarter, one thing I told Olivia, I told everyone, I'm not doing any announcing. I'm not doing that because that keeps you close to the game. And I kind of felt like I would have a hard time. It'd been a big, you know, been my life. And he kind of talked me into doing the announcing, and I never missed football doing it. I just enjoyed doing that. We had fun. Yeah. He was a great mentor for me to start out, great advice, how to do this. And of course, we were fortunate that the team got pretty good about that time. For the first time, I always said, boy, I wouldn't have done this during my playing days. I wouldn't be the announcer. That could not be fun. But the team got good, and you know, the fans got excited, and the city got excited. He and I had a lot of fun.
Great timing. Great timing, because we came together in '86, same year that Mora and Finks came. The next year they had their first winning season. They were going to the playoffs. WWL Radio had this push about turn down your TV, listen to Saints radio, and a lot of people did, primarily because of this guy. He had such great credibility. He could have said anything on the air and people would have bought it. He could have said the football is round and stuff. People would have said, wouldn't have even questioned it. So he had such great credibility that made it a lot easier for me. And we had such great timing to come together in '86, and then he left in '98, which was Peyton's first year, and the second year of Mike Ditka. Now, how's that for timing? You know? So he comes in with Mora, they get good. He goes out with Ditka, they go down in the trash can, and I'm left holding the bag as usual.
Was it like instant grits? I mean, the instant chemistry right away, Jim?
I think so, because I'd seen him as a player and admired him so much as a player. And you know this, when you go to the locker room, it's the guys that can handle it in defeat. And of course, who had more experience in that than Archie. So, I mean, year after year, game after game, I'd be in there with the last people. He'd talk to everybody explaining his most recent interception or whatever. And I told somebody, I think I've seen Archie Manning more in the nude than Olivia has.
And it was moments like that that gave Jim a clearer picture of just who Archie the man was, professional both in and out of uniform. And he had a genuine way about him, one that would easily carry over to the broadcast booth. In 1986, it did.
My first game, we're playing the Falcons over there. And so for some reason, I couldn't go over on the plane. So I came over on Sunday morning, real early on a 6 a.m. flight to Atlanta on Sunday morning. So Jim had suggested, said the bus leaves at 10 o'clock. Said, why don't we get on the bus early and let's visit a little bit about what we're going to do today. And I started asking questions about, I didn't want to step on anybody or when do I come in, this and that. And we kind of got going. And all of a sudden we're still sitting there on the bus. And I said, Jim, is this bus going anywhere? Well, the buses had left. We're on what are we on, a city bus or something?
I think it was a bunch of senior citizens going to look at the leaves in Dahlonega. And Archie said, are we on the right bus?
We missed the bus. Yeah, it was a good start.
And he never listened to me after that.
This media business is full of people with egos. You're a former NFL player. You're joining a guy in the booth who thinks he knows everything about the NFL. Was there a bit of a clash at all?
No, we didn't clash. We didn't clash. We never had a problem.
They didn't have any problems because the more they were around each other, the more their partnership took on a bit of a brotherhood. What was supposed to be work never felt like it.
But we used to give away watches at one point, the Oakland Heart Saints watch, and then later with the ties. Remember we got ties from Wembley here in town? So you could get 2 or 3 ties to be on. And the media, we had people lining up wanting to come on at halftime for the free watch or the free ties, some of which I'm still wearing, by the way.
But I got ready to give my answer to a question. It was going to be 4 or 5 sentences, something significant about the Packers who were playing that night. I went, yeah, but blah, 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 blah. And it just,
we've all been there.
Nothing came out. I mean, I couldn't make it happen. And of course, I went numb.
Your life flashes in front of your eyes. It might have been 2 seconds, but it felt like you were up there for an hour.
Archie also noticed something else about his broadcasting partner right away that he'd need to help Jim with.
Dalton Hughes running to the rope. He's hit. He's fumbled. They recover. The Falcons recover. And we'll be back after this commercial break. God! Tear it up. But that was telling, that he loved what he did, but we had a little different approach at that point.
I know y'all prided yourself on just being honest with the listener or the viewer, but who had the hardest time being critical when needed?
Oh, I did. Okay. He had to work on me a little bit there because my initial philosophy was anything I say, I'm going to say it thinking that maybe Jim Everett's wife is listening to this broadcast, and I wouldn't want to make her mad. Or Reuben Mays' girlfriend is listening to that, and he kind of had to get me off of that a little bit. You got to tell the story out there. It doesn't have to be overly critical. You don't say somebody's eating Alpo, but I was. And I guess that's understandable, but we got by.
In other words, these two leaned on and learned from each other and had a lot of fun doing both.
I didn't make it one time. I got caught in Salt Lake City, and I got to San Francisco at halftime. One time.
It was the best half we ever had as a broadcaster. Nobody missed him, really. Remember that one year you and I did Ole Miss games on a Saturday when Billy Brewer was the head coach.
We did. I forgot about that.
So then we'd have to go Sunday morning to wherever the Saints were playing. And so we'd do the Ole Miss games. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, obviously he's a god with Ole Miss. He can say anything. So he carried the broadcast. But we had this guy that was a friend of his, and because they didn't do a lot of games, they overly produced him like crazy. So you know what it's like when you've got to me, the hardest part about doing a broadcast on TV is the open. And we'd never get a rehearsal. He'd always be right up. We're going to rehearse half an hour before the game. Half an hour, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. and he'd have this whole big open. First we're going to go here, then we've got some sound that we shot 5 years ago, and then we want to go to a live shot, and then we're going to go to the parking lot, and well, we don't have time to rehearse. Here we go, 3, 2, 1. I said, you know, I'm not nearly as good as you think I am. I can't possibly do that. So we'd fudge our way through it.
Jim, I read that you said that what made Archie so great is that he came back to New Orleans and stayed when a lot of professional athletes would come, part-time livers here, and then they'd move on. Why was that so important for the continuity of the two of you in the booth and to kind of just help it grow and be as successful as it was?
He had committed to New Orleans. He could have gone anywhere and done anything at any major market. He stayed. He loved New Orleans, and New Orleans loved him right back. So I think that helped our relationship too, because we both appreciated the same things, and he showed me a lot about this city I didn't know.
I was going to say, his story is similar to yours, because you came here from Atlanta. You thought it was just going to be a stopover, but New Orleans grabs a hold of you and just keeps you here. Next thing you know, 30 years later, 40 years later, you're still here.
You always said New Orleans, we were so lucky to have Jim all these years. When he started doing the Saints games, because he was a major market guy, and he could have gone to the bigger places, the major market, but I think the addition of doing the Saints too kept him here too. We were friends, and then we became really good friends, and we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed our conversations of preparing for the game.
And now, from one friend to another, the conversation has shifted to getting ready for retirement.
He's got retirement figured out. He's got it figured out. He's been planning it, and he knows, you know, I've taught him a few things about kind of, I don't call it kissing up to people, but
he's got that down.
Getting to know people where he can go fish where the fish are. You know, he's pretty good at finding fish.
I think one, and I said this upon my retirement when I announced it, that the opportunity to spend the last 6 years, 5 years plus, at Fox 8 in semi-retirement was the whole idea that would be the transition into retirement. And it was so nice for me to do it in that way, to just do football and to get back in it with guys that I'd been around for much of my career. It was a nice way to ease into retirement, and now I think I'm there, and there are a lot more fish out there still to frustrate me.
I love the way the community rallied with the Hokie Strong campaign and all of that, and it was hard. It was really hard. It's like losing an uncle for me and a brother for my dad.
Pitch it to him right, trying to turn the corner with a block in front of him. He's to the goal line and in.
Yeah, that was a tough time. I missed the guy so much. Think of him all the time, especially being on the road in his absence with the Saints, the things he would say, the takes he would have on certain things. I admired him so much and saw that struggle firsthand. That changed things. That kind of makes you realize your mortality maybe more so than you would.
When Hokie was in the ICU at Ochsner's, and he was told that there was nothing else they could do, he said to me, well, call Jim. It was actually, he said, call Jim and Stan. And that's what I did. They had a awesome relationship, a love for each other, like brothers. It was beautiful. And even though him and Jim didn't see each other all the time and do stuff all the time, they had this bond. It's a beautiful bond, I think.
Saying goodbye to Hokie was very difficult for Jim, but he knew that turning the page was necessary. And in doing so, he found another lifelong friend to share the booth with.
Hand off to McAllister. McAllister staying on his feet. And with some help, he's down to the goal line. It is in. Yes. Deuce McAllister.
It seems like just yesterday that the voice of the Saints was keeping a close eye on the one-time heart of the franchise. For many of his 9 NFL seasons, Deuce McAllister gave the Saints their identity. And every Sunday, it was Jim Henderson's job to reveal it to the world.
2nd and goal from the 3. Henderson in motion. Give it off to Deuce. Deuce looking for a running route. Yes! And he's on it. Deuce McAllister with a record-setting team TD of 3 yards.
But in 2017, the tables somewhat turned. Deuce joined Jim in the booth to help him paint the game day picture for Saints fans. It's a move Deuce vowed he'd never do.
For me personally, you know, it was probably more so of avoiding the media, not being a part of the media. And, you know, my wife, some friends, man, you need to do the media. I don't want to go into the media. I don't want to talk about football. And, you know, I love the game. I watched the game. But, you know, when I retired, I really never followed it.
Turns out Deuce didn't really need to follow the game after retirement. From day one and game one, he was a natural at breaking down what just happened on the field. What Hokie and Archie were before, Deuce McAllister had become present day, the perfect sidekick to Henderson.
How big was his learning curve, Jim?
Not big at all.
Yeah.
Nope. I said when we first got acquainted, when he filled in for Hokie during the last year that Hokie was the man, I saw how easily he did it. I was not surprised at all, having seen him as a player and seeing how well he prepared to play. I knew he'd do the same thing in the booth. For him, it was only a matter of the announcer type stuff. But as far as his knowledge of the game, the way he sees the field, sky's the limit.
It's just like playing. I want the perfect broadcast. You know, we want to be 100%. You know, we want to be, whether it's the call, the fourth down call, or whether it's third down call, the decision, or the 2 minutes. You know, we want to be able to say that that fan, even if they're there, they learn a little bit from us.
It's a big one.
But with Jim's recent retirement from everything not attached to a fishing pole, us is now just Deuce and another play-by-play person in the waiting. Their relationship has gone from being strictly business to preferably casual. The announcer that once had plenty to say about the player.
Pretty nice, huh, Deuce? They can run, but they can't hide. We can do this some more.
Now just wants to talk about the latest catch.
Deuce has got another one. Look at that bluegill. See the size of that bluegill?
A sunny day in Poplarville, Mississippi is like most days for Henderson, doing what he wants, when he wants, and most times he wants to be on the water, chasing that elusive big fish. Deuce was raised in Mississippi, so this feels like home to him. In fact, it's in a country setting like this that Deuce first heard of and literally heard Jim on the radio.
I didn't know the person, but I had heard his voice. You know, and I didn't know, you know, yeah, that's Jim Henderson. He's the voice for the Saints. I knew his voice more so than I knew him as a person, or even to say that's his face. You know, I could understand or heard his voice, and that's the Saints playing right there.
And for Deuce, hearing and later seeing the voice in action led to believing he could work alongside him. Their partnership in the booth lasted just 2 seasons, but it was memorable because the second year came with some bonus playoff football.
4th and 23 from the 34. Here's Newton under pressure, and he's going to be tackled and sacked and dropped, and that is the final play of this game.
Which means Jim rides off into the sunset, with his lasting memory being the Saints as winners. As for Deuce, he'll continue his Saints radio gig, partnering up with someone else next season. It'll feel different for Deuce, and for Jim, and for every member of the Who Dat Nation that for years has turned down their television sets and turned up Saints radio to let Jim paint them a picture.
We're not talking about 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We're talking about over 30 years. You know, and so the game of football, a player on average 3.5, he's done it plus 30 years. And so he's seen uniforms change, he's seen the game change, players' weight, players' size, technology change. And so for him to be able to give that perspective and now to be able to say, I'm out, I'm going to enjoy it from a different perspective, I think it's pretty unique. I mean, but for me personally, you know, man, I had an opportunity to work with him, you know, and going forward, you know, there's a little fear. I'm going to be honest, there's some fear. I mean, because you know what you have to try to live up to.
Hey Jim, this is Drew Brees. I just wanted to wish you a very big congratulations. Throughout my time here with the New Orleans Saints, you have been such a professional. I view you in such high regard, as I know this entire community does, and certainly all of the Who Dat Nation does. You're a model for the rest of us, and certainly everyone within your industry. And I just want to wish you a big congratulations.
Brees throws into the end zone, touchdown for the Saints.
Just a wonderful person, a real pro. You know, I admire watching him. I don't know if he ever had a bad broadcast.
The next person that any of us meet who doesn't like Jim Henderson will be the first and will be immediately shipped to Mars. Jim Henderson is so beloved and so gracious, but stood on a strong platform and standard of journalistic ethics, writing, reporting, and sometimes in our media world, as it's evolved, those things have eroded for a lot of us. Not for Jim. Jim held a standard and kept that standard present no matter if it was reporting on friends, reporting on people he didn't know. You got treated fairly, but as a viewer or a listener, you got the truth. So Jim Henderson over the years embodies everything that a great journalist should be about, still can be about, and Jim Henderson was. And he did it all while being beloved in New Orleans. Says a lot.
I see Jim Henderson's career to be running in perfect symmetry with names like Summerall and Inberg and Gowdy and Whitaker and McKay. He was cut from that cloth, a classical broadcaster who always delivered a gold medal type performance.
I've been fortunate, you know, growing up the son of a sportscaster in Louisiana, sportsman's paradise. See what I taught him? That's a pretty good one.
And he's going to be tackled and sacked and dropped.
A smooth, slippery, almost effortless running style that leads you to suspect he secretly sprayed his uniform with WD-40.
For nearly half a century, Jim Henderson's had the gift for gab, and it wasn't just reserved for his radio audience.
We went to Cocodrie one time, bull red fishing, after a Saints game, after a Sunday night game. We drove to Cocodrie, and Derek was sick before we ever got on the water. And he was sick the whole day catching bull reds, and he never once asked to go in.
On the water, with no time cues, Hondo still has a lot to say. And if you notice...
Then most recently going to Mexico, down to Lake Comadero and catching 540 in 4 days.
The stories all sound about the same. For as long as Jim can remember, his favorite place to be has been on the water. And just as it was some 35 years ago, his son Derek remains right alongside him.
Derek and I would go to Grand Isle fishing, and he was just 5, 6 years old.
We've been fishing together as long as I can remember. It's something we both love to do.
At a very early age, fishing was how Derek connected with his dad. It's something they loved to do when time allowed, which for the longtime voice of the Saints and sportscasting legend wasn't often enough. For as long as Derek can remember, football season was as busy for his dad as it was fun for him.
It meant I got to go to the games and run around the Superdome, and you know, the team was pretty bad back then, so I spent half the game making paper airplanes and throwing them towards the field. But you know, it afforded me a lot of access, and that was great. And you know, we got to spend some time together pre-game, walking the field, and then after the game near the locker room. It was all very neat.
So neat that Derek at times became the envy of his friends.
I signed a few autographs. I don't think they're worth too much anymore.
All joking aside, Derek, like most fans of the Saints and most followers of his dad, is going to miss hearing that familiar voice on the radio and seeing that recognizable face on the television. But he also understands that all good things must come to an end.
I'm pretty proud of him for the career he's had, and you know, I respect everything he's done, and you know, I'll miss listening to him when I'm watching the games, I know that. But you know, there's a time and place to end everything, I guess, and I don't know if it's a sad thing.
Not a sad day, because Derek began to recognize what Jim already knew, that the time had come to turn the page to what comes next in life. Which is a selfish way of saying those football months when his dad couldn't be around are thankfully a thing of the past. And these two have been taking full advantage of making up for lost time. Many of their recent trips have centered around a rod and reel.
Derek is a natural fisherman, and we've fished most recently Mexico, we've fished Saskatchewan, a lot in Canada, and of course all the lakes around here in Mississippi that are close by. Done a lot of salt water.
But I've been fortunate, you know, growing up the son of a sportscaster in Louisiana, sportsman's paradise. See what I taught him? Fish.
That's a pretty good one. If there's anything he's learned from me, is that you don't catch a fish sitting in the camp. You got to be on the water with your line in the lake. You can't feel sorry for yourself, and he'll fish hard, and it usually pays off.
In other words, patience has finally paid off for Derek and Jim in more ways than one.
Jim, did you think about going one more year based on what you saw last year and you knew there were only a couple pieces and maybe doing it again?
A little bit, Juan, but then if they didn't make a run or something happened, I didn't enjoy it as much, and I was getting to the point where I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. I wanted to be home more than I wanted to be on the road again, so I was ready.
I knew he'd been kicking it around, and he told me several months back, so I'd known for a while. So I made sure to tune into all the games as much as I could and savor it for what it was. And you know, it'll be different for sure, him not calling the games, but more time to do this.
Yeah, more time to watch Derek catch fish, which I love.
One Father's Day, he decided that he and I were going to go fishing. And this was over in Mississippi, kind of near where they ended up buying on a fishing lake. And I was into romance novels, so I was reading my book. And I put down the book and picked up the fishing pole and probably caught the biggest fish of the day. And he thought I would get the bug, you know. He thought I would be, oh, fishing's the best thing ever. Let's keep fishing. And he was like really energetic and excited about it. And I was like, that's great. Put down the pole and picked up my book, and then I read the rest of the day. And he didn't catch anything, I don't think, that whole day.